A woman in a simple gray pantsuit is told to go wait with the other defendants. She is just trying to find her new office, but the court clerk sizes up her dark skin and dismisses her. The clerk, a woman who had long ruled this courthouse lobby, lets out a high, sharp laugh. "A judge, you honey. That's the funniest thing I've heard all day." She turns her back, not knowing her entire world is about to be dismantled because the woman she just insulted isn't a defendant. She isn't a lawyer. She is Judge Nicole Brooks, and she has just seen something she was never supposed to see. The Mercer County Courthouse was not a building that welcomed you. It was a building that processed you. It stood as a block of imposing, soot-stained granite. Its small, slit-like windows looked less like portals for light and more like arrow slits in a fortress. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of stale coffee, industrial floor wax, and the quiet metallic scent of desperation. The main hall was still mercifully quiet. The rush of defendants, witnesses, and frantic lawyers hadn't yet begun. Nicole Brooks stood for a moment just inside the heavy bronze doors, adjusting the strap of the simple leather satchel on her shoulder. She was new, not just to the courthouse but to the state, having accepted a transfer to fill a sudden vacancy on the Superior Court bench. She was here early in her civilian clothes, a charcoal gray pantsuit that was professional yet anonymous. She always did this. On her first day at any new assignment, she arrived before the chaos, before the robes and the gavel, to simply watch, to feel the rhythm of the place. A courtroom, she believed, had a heartbeat, and often that heartbeat was arrhythmic, sick. Her eyes scanned the grand echoing lobby. To her right, a long, scratched wooden bench. To her left, the main clerk of court's office, a fortress within the fortress, protected by a wall of thick, bullet-resistant glass. There were 3 windows, but only one was open, casting a pale yellow light onto the linoleum floor. Behind that window sat a woman. She had a magnificent, towering beehive of blonde-gray hair that looked like it had been sprayed into concrete submission. Her glasses were on a beaded chain around her neck, and her face was set in a permanent expression of sour authority. A small engraved plastic sign on the glass read, "Sandra Mills, Head Clerk." Nicole watched as a young man in an ill-fitting suit, clearly a brand-new lawyer from the public defender's office, approached Sandra's window. "Excuse me, Miss Mills," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "I'm just trying to file a continuance motion for State versus Peterson. I was told—" Sandra didn't even look up from her computer. She held up one sharp-nailed finger. The lawyer physically recoiled as if she had slapped him. He waited. A full minute passed. Nicole noted the power play. Sandra was teaching him his place. Finally, Sandra sighed, a long theatrical breath of pure inconvenience. She turned her head slowly. "Peterson. Right. You're late," she snapped. "The filing deadline was yesterday. You public defenders think you can just wander in here anytime you please and dump your paperwork on my desk. I have judges to manage." She snatched the papers from his hand. "Go wait. I'll get to it when I get to it. And your tie is crooked." The lawyer, face burning red, mumbled a thank you and scurried away, straightening his tie. Nicole let out a slow, quiet breath. So that's the gatekeeper, she thought. She knew the type. Every courthouse had one. A career bureaucrat who had mistaken their small vital cog in the machine for the entire engine. They didn't just file papers. They wielded power. They controlled access, schedules, and by extension, the flow of justice itself. And this one, Nicole suspected, enjoyed the taste of that power far too much. She adjusted her satchel and walked forward. Her heels made a sharp, clean click-clack on the floor, a sound that seemed to annoy Sandra Mills before she even arrived. Nicole stood at the window. She gave the clerk a polite, neutral smile. "Good morning," she said. Sandra's eyes did a quick, dismissive scan from Nicole's simple, unstyled hair down her dark face over the plain pantsuit and to her practical shoes. It was a comprehensive inventory of her perceived status. The verdict was clear in the clerk's eyes. Unimportant. "Morning," Sandra said, her tone flat. "What case?" "No case," Nicole replied, keeping her voice pleasant. "My name is Nicole Brooks. I'm the new judicial appointment for Part 3B. I'm here to pick up my keys and the welcome packet from the court administrator." Sandra Mills went perfectly still. She looked up from her screen, and this time the look was not dismissive. It was openly, shockingly evaluative. She looked Nicole up and down again. Then a small, tight smile pulled at the corner of her mouth. "Defendant check-in is down the hall. Room 104, she said, gesturing vaguely with her pen. "You're early. They don't open till later." Nicole's own smile didn't waver, but her eyes went cold. "I'm sorry. I think you misheard me. I'm not a defendant. I'm Judge Brooks. I'm taking over Judge Porter's calendar in Part 3B. This time, Sandra Mills didn't smile. She laughed. It wasn't a small chuckle. It was a loud, high, barking cackle that echoed in the empty lobby. It was a laugh of pure, unadulterated ridicule. "A judge?" she cackled, leaning back in her chair and pressing a hand to her chest. "Honey, that's rich. Oh, they'll just let anyone play dress-up these days, won't they?" She leaned forward, her face a mask of patronizing condescension. "Look, lady, I don't know what you're trying to pull. Maybe you're one of those sovereign citizen types, or maybe you're just plain lost. But judges," she said, tapping the glass, "don't look like you, and they don't just wander in off the street." "Don't look like me," Nicole repeated, her voice dropping. "You heard me!" Sandra snapped, her brief humor evaporating into pure venom. "Now I've got actual work to do. Go on, get. Go wait with the rest of the public over on the benches until your real case is called, and don't bother me again." Sandra Mills swiveled her chair around, presenting Nicole with her stiff, beehived back. It was the ultimate dismissal. Nicole stood at the window. The silence in the lobby was profound. The young public defender was watching from the far corner, his eyes wide with a mixture of horror and fascination. Nicole felt the familiar hot rush of anger. It was an old, tired companion. The casual, baked-in racism that assumed her skin color dictated her station. She could have escalated. She could have pulled out her judicial ID card issued by the governor's office. She could have demanded to see the court administrator, a man named David Collins. But a different instinct took over. The sharp, predatory instinct of a prosecutor, which she had been for years before taking the bench. Sandra Mills wasn't just rude. She was bold. This level of open contempt didn't grow in a vacuum. It was nurtured. It was a sign of entitlement so deep that it felt completely protected. And Nicole, who had been planning to go straight to her new chambers, made a different decision. "Fine," Nicole said, her voice perfectly calm. "I'll wait." She turned, not with a shuffle of defeat, but with a deliberate, measured pace. She walked to the hard wooden bench against the far wall. She sat down, placed her leather satchel in her lap, and crossed her legs. She was no longer just feeling the rhythm of the courthouse. She was hunting. Sandra Mills from her glass fortress was the most powerful person in this lobby, and she had just made the critical, fatal mistake of laughing at the one person who had just become more powerful than her. The lobby began to fill. The wave was composed of people who had to be there. The defendants on bond, the families, the people fighting evictions. They shuffled in, clutching pieces of paper, their faces drawn with anxiety. They formed a disorganized, nervous line in front of Sandra's window. From her vantage point, Nicole Brooks had a perfect, unobstructed view. She sat as still as a heron, her gaze missing nothing. She watched Sandra's theater. To a white man in a crisp suit, she was all, "Yes, sir, Mr. Donovan, and right away, sir." To a panicked-looking Hispanic woman holding a crying baby, she was a brick wall. "English," Sandra barked. "I don't speak whatever that is. Next." To a young black man asking where to pay a fine, she sighed. "Do I look like a cashier? Go to the basement and tuck your shirt in. This is a courthouse, not a nightclub." It was a disgusting, predictable display. But then Nicole saw it. The man in the crisp suit, the one Sandra had called Mr. Donovan, returned. His name was Mark Donovan. Nicole recognized him vaguely from a legal review. He was a bottom feeder, a fixer who specialized in DUIs for the rich and messy divorces. He was all cologne, expensive watch, and reptilian charm. He didn't stand in line. He walked right up to the side of the glass booth to a small solid door marked Clerk's Office, Staff Only. He gave it a specific rat-a-tat knock. A moment later, the door was unlocked from the inside. Sandra Mills herself opened it, just a crack. Her entire demeanor had changed. The sour, combative mask was gone, replaced by a greedy, obsequious smile. "Mark, you're early," she whispered, her voice carrying in the quiet hall. "Got a client with an arrangement," Donovan murmured, slipping a hand into his jacket. "You have that thing we discussed, the docket assignment right here," Sandra said. She discreetly passed him a single sheet of paper folded twice. Nicole watched, laser-focused. A docket assignment. Why the secrecy? Lawyers could pull that online. Unless this was a pre-assignment. Unless Sandra was letting him know which judge his case would be randomly assigned to before the assignment was officially made, giving him time to prepare a judge-specific motion, or worse, file a last-second continuance if he got a judge he didn't like. It was gaming the system. Donovan took the paper and just as smoothly passed her an envelope. It was a standard white business envelope, but it was thick. Too thick for a letter. It was the thickness of folded cash. Sandra took it without a second glance, slipping it into the drawer of her desk. "Pleasure doing business," she said. "Always, Sandra," Donovan said, flashing a toothy grin. He turned and strode out of the courthouse, the picture of confidence. Nicole felt her blood run cold. This wasn't just racism. This wasn't just a bitter woman on a power trip. This was felony corruption. This was bribery happening in plain sight before the court was even in session. She had been here for less than an hour, and she had just witnessed the clerk of court taking a bribe to compromise the integrity of the judicial lottery. She almost stood up. Her instinct was to flash her badge, call the bailiffs, and have them both arrested. But she held back. The prosecutor in her took over. One observation is an incident. Two is a pattern. She waited. Later, a woman ran into the lobby. She was frantic, her eyes red from crying, her hair a mess. She clutched a thick sheaf of documents to her chest. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. She ran to Sandra's window where the line was now deep. "Please," the woman begged, cutting the line. "Please, I have to file this. It's a restraining order." "He found my sister's address. He said he's coming. Please, I have to file it before my hearing." The man in line, a construction worker in a dusty jacket, turned. "Hey, lady, back of the line." "I can't," she sobbed, pressing her papers against the glass. "Please, Miss Mills, please." Sandra Mills looked at the woman with a face of utter boredom. "First, you don't cut the line. Second, all temporary restraining orders and ex parte motions had to be filed by the deadline to be heard this morning. You're late. You'll have to file it, and it will be on tomorrow's docket." "Tomorrow?" the woman shrieked, a sound of pure terror. He could find me by tomorrow. I don't have until tomorrow. It's right here. Can't you just please stamp it? It's past the cutoff, Sandra said, pointing to the clock. The computer locks the filings. My hands are tied. It's the system. The woman completely broke down, sliding down the glass wall onto the floor, her sobs echoing. No, you don't understand. Nicole watched. This was the moment. This was the test. Sandra watched the woman cry for a long, cold moment. Then she sighed as if dealing with a petulant child. She came out from behind the door, walking over to the sobbing woman. Look, Sandra said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial, dirty whisper that Nicole could just barely overhear. Look, get up. You're making a scene. She helped the woman to her feet. I might be able to help you. The system is flexible sometimes, but the late filing override requires a fee. A significant one for the administrative hassle. The woman's head snapped up, hope and confusion warring on her face. A fee? I'll pay it. How much? The fine for an emergency override, Sandra said, her eyes dead, is cash. Nicole watched the woman's face fall. She only had a certain amount. It was all she had until her check. Sandra considered this. She glanced around the lobby, her eyes sweeping right over Nicole, dismissing her as part of the worthless scenery. The amount would have to do. Sandra conceded as if doing her a great favor. Give it to me. The woman fumbled in her purse, her hands shaking so badly she could barely open her wallet. She pulled out a wad of crumpled bills and handed them over. Sandra took the cash, palmed it, and then took the woman's paperwork. Wait here, she commanded. She went back into her booth. Nicole watched her every move. Sandra sat at her computer. She typed for a moment, then she opened a drawer, pulled out a manual date and time stamp, and fiddled with the dials. She rolled it back. She stamped the woman's papers. Received earlier. She had backdated a legal filing in exchange for a cash bribe. She was extorting a domestic violence victim. Nicole Brooks slowly closed her eyes. The rage she felt was so cold, so pure, it was almost serene. It was the rage of a surgeon identifying a cancer. This wasn't just a rotten cog. This was a tumor that was poisoning the entire institution. Sandra came back out and handed the papers to the woman. There, stamped. You're on the docket. Go to courtroom 2A now. Get out of my sight. The woman, still crying but now with relief, thanked her profusely and ran toward the elevators. Sandra Mills went back to her desk, slid the cash into the same drawer as Mark Donovan's envelope, and called, "Next." Nicole looked at the clock on the wall. She had a new purpose. This was no longer about her own dignity. It was no longer about the sting of racism. That was the symptom. The disease was Sandra Mills, and Judge Nicole Brooks was here to cut it out. For the next stretch of time, Nicole sat. She did not move. She just watched. She cataloged every interaction, every sneer, every smirk. She saw Sandra lose a file for a low-income housing advocate, forcing a delay, and then find it for a corporate lawyer who brought her a box of expensive-looking pastries. The entire lobby was her personal kingdom, and she ruled it with a blend of petty tyranny and calculated corruption. A tall, uniformed man came through the side doors. He had bailiff on his jacket and a name tag that read, Officer Frank Dawson. He had a weary, seen-it-all face. He nodded at Sandra. Morning, Sandra. Usual chaos. You know it, Frank, Sandra said, smiling warmly at him. It was a complete transformation. The dregs are out in force today. Judge Porter would have had half of them in holding for contempt by now. I don't know about this new one. Brooks, right? From out of state? That's the one, Sandra said, lowering her voice, but not enough. Some affirmative action hire, I'm sure. Probably won't know a motion to compel from a motion to dismiss. We'll have to train another one. It's exhausting." Nicole listened, her expression unchanged. Affirmative action hire. Another barb. Another assumption. She filed it away with the rest. "Well," Dawson said, finishing his coffee and tossing the cup. "Time to open the doors to the circus. You ready for Part 3B? "As I'll ever be," Sandra sighed. Dawson walked to courtroom 3B, which was right off the main lobby, and unlocked the heavy wooden doors. The first few lawyers and citizens waiting for the docket began to trickle in. Sandra gathered a stack of files, her face settling back into its sour mask. This was the moment. Nicole Brooks stood up. The sudden movement after her long stillness drew Sandra's eye. Nicole zipped her leather satchel. She adjusted the collar of her pantsuit. She walked not to the clerk's window, but directly toward the judge's and staff-only door beside it, the same one Mark Donovan had used. Sandra's head snapped up. The casual contempt was back, now sharpened with irritation. "Hey, you. I told you that door is not for the public," she shouted. The entire lobby quieted. "Are you deaf? I told you to wait on the bench." Nicole ignored her. She reached the door. Sandra was on her feet now, her voice rising to a screech. "I will have you held in contempt of court. You can't just—" Nicole reached into her suit pocket and pulled out a simple white plastic key card. It was the temporary all-access pass given to her by the head of state judicial administration. Pending her permanent ID, she didn't look at Sandra. She faced the small black scanner on the wall and held the card up. There was a quiet beep, and the light on the scanner flashed from red to green. Sandra Mills' screech died in her throat, choked off by a sudden, sharp intake of breath. The lobby was dead silent. The only sound was the heavy click of the electronic lock disengaging. Nicole pushed the door open. She paused in the doorway and turned her head. She looked directly at Sandra Mills, whose face had gone the color of spoiled milk. The beehive hair seemed to wilt. Her mouth was open, but no sound was coming out. "Miss Mills," Judge Nicole Brooks said, her voice quiet but carrying the unmistakable ring of absolute authority. It was a voice that didn't request, it commanded. "It is almost time for court to convene. In that time, I expect 3 things." Sandra's hands, which had been on her hips, were now shaking at her sides. "First," Nicole continued, "you will retrieve the keys to my chambers, Part 3B, from wherever you have them stored. Second, you will fetch my welcome packet from the court administrator's office. I'm sure Mr. Collins will be fascinated to hear about my reception this morning. And third," Nicole said, her eyes boring into the terrified clerk, "you will bring me a cup of black coffee. You will place all 3 items on my bench in courtroom 3B. You will then return to your station and prepare for the roll call." Nicole let the orders hang in the air. The young public defender, who had been lingering to watch, was now desperately trying to hide his smile behind a case file. "Your Honor," Sandra stammered, her voice a panicked whisper. I didn't recognize you. I thought—" "You thought," Nicole said, cutting her off with surgical precision, "that I was a defendant. You thought I was the public. You thought I didn't look like a judge. What you failed to think, Miss Mills, is that the person you are speaking to, any person who walks into this courthouse, deserves a baseline of human dignity. Your assumptions are not my problem, but they are, as of this moment, your problem." Nicole stepped through the doorway. "Don't be late," she said over her shoulder. "It sets a bad example." The door clicked shut behind her, leaving a stunned, silent lobby in her wake. Sandra Mills stood frozen for a full moment, her face a grotesque mask of dawning horror. The blood drained from her head so fast she had to grip her desk to stay upright. The humiliation was total. The power dynamic of the Mercer County Courthouse had just been inverted instantly and violently. Then terror gave way to panic. She flew into motion, grabbing her own keys, fumbling at her drawer, then sprinting as much as she could down the hall toward the administrator's office. She was no longer a queen. She was a terrified servant, running an errand for a new master. And the worst part, the part that was making her heart hammer against her ribs, wasn't just the humiliation. It was the sudden, sickening memory of Mark Donovan, the envelope, the woman with the restraining order, the backdated stamp. How long had that black woman, that judge, been sitting on that bench? What exactly had she seen? The minutes Nicole spent in her new chambers were a blur of focused preparation. The room smelled of old books and lemon polish. Judge Porter, her predecessor, had left nothing behind. It was a blank slate. Nicole found the judicial robes hanging in a tall wooden wardrobe. She pulled the heavy black fabric over her shoulders, the familiar weight settling on her. It was her armor. She was not, as Sandra had suggested, an affirmative action hire. She was a Harvard law graduate, a former assistant U.S. attorney, and a federal prosecutor who had dismantled two of the largest racketeering rings in Chicago. She had taken this state-level judgeship to be closer to her aging father. She hadn't come here looking for a fight. But Sandra Mills, in her arrogance, had just started a war. Officer Frank Dawson, his face carefully neutral, bellowed, "All rise. The Mercer County Superior Court Part 3B is now in session. The Honorable Judge Nicole Brooks presiding." The door opened. Nicole walked out and up to the bench. The courtroom was medium-sized and packed. Lawyers filled the jury box and the front rows. Defendants and their families, a mix of anxiety and boredom, filled the back. And at the clerk station to her right stood Sandra Mills. She looked as if she had aged a decade. Her face was pale and slick with sweat. The keys to the chambers, the welcome packet, and a styrofoam cup of coffee were all placed precisely as ordered on the corner of Nicole's bench. Nicole sat. The room sat. The scraping of chairs echoed. She opened the first file. "Good morning," she said, her voice amplified by the microphone, crisp and clear. "I am Judge Brooks. I will be handling this calendar moving forward. I have my own set of rules. They are simple. Be on time, be prepared, and be respectful. To me, to the court, and to each other. We will conduct the business of the people with integrity and efficiency. Is that understood?" A murmur of, "Yes, Your Honor," rippled through the lawyers. "Excellent," Nicole said. She looked down at the docket and saw the first case, State versus Peterson, the young public defender's case. "First up," she said. "Docket, State versus Peterson. Counsel, please approach." The young public defender, the one from the lobby, walked forward, his eyes still wide. "Your Honor," he began, "I filed a motion for continuance this morning." "I see it," Nicole said, "and I also see that the state opposes." The assistant district attorney, a sharp woman in a blue suit, stood. "We do, Your Honor. The victim has flown in. We are ready to proceed." Nicole looked back at the public defender. "Counselor, your reason." "My client's alibi witness was just located. She lives in a rural area." "Motion granted," Nicole said. The ADA and the public defender both blinked. "Your Honor," the ADA said. "Motion granted, counsel," Nicole repeated, staring at the file. "The right to present a full defense is constitutional. The inconvenience to the state is logistical. We will find a new date." She looked at Sandra. "Miss Mills, please find a new trial date for several weeks from now. Please coordinate with both counsel." Sandra fumbled with the computer, her hands visibly shaking so much she could barely type. The young public defender was staring, mouth agape. He had just won a motion he was sure to lose. It was the first subtle shift. Nicole proceeded through the next cases with rapid, sharp efficiency. She denied a routine delay from a high-priced lawyer. She granted a hardship request from a defendant. She was fair, fast, and unyielding. The lawyers were catching on quickly. This judge did not suffer fools. Then she reached the middle of the stack. Next, a request for an ex parte temporary restraining order. Hayes versus Hayes. The frantic woman from the lobby, Rebecca Hayes, was sitting in the front row, trembling. "Miss Hayes, please approach," Nicole said. She read the petition. It was a brutal, straightforward story of spousal abuse and escalating threats. "Ms. Hayes, I have read your petition. I find your claims credible and the threat imminent. The temporary restraining order is granted, effective immediately," Nicole said. The woman burst into tears, this time of relief. "Thank you, Your Honor. Oh, God, thank you." "Officer Dawson," Nicole said, "please escort Ms. Hayes to the temporary restraining order office to have the order served and ensure she has a safe escort from this building." "Yes, Your Honor," Dawson said, moving. "And Miss Mills," Nicole said, her voice suddenly sharp. Sandra flinched as if struck. "Yes, Your Honor. Please bring me the original filing of Hayes versus Hayes, the one from your desk." This was it. The air in the courtroom changed. "This was not a normal request, Your Honor." Sandra stammered. "The file is right here in the system." "I am not asking about the system, Miss Mills. I am asking for the physical paper you stamped this morning. Retrieve it now." Sandra's face was ashen. This was a direct, impossible to misunderstand order. She walked, her legs like lead, back to her office behind the courtroom. The entire room was silent, watching this bizarre, tense drama unfold. She returned a moment later with the file. She handed it up to Nicole. Nicole looked at it. She looked at the smudged red ink stamp in the corner. Received earlier. She then looked up at the large, institutional clock on the courtroom wall. "Miss Mills," Nicole said, her voice dangerously quiet, "I observed you take this filing from Ms. Hayes myself. I observed you stamp it." Sandra's breath was coming in short, panicked gasps. "And my observation," Nicole continued, "is that this filing was received by you later than the stamp indicates." The courtroom exploded in hushed whispers. The lawyer's eyes went wide. This was an accusation of backdating, a cardinal sin. "Your Honor, there must be a mistake. The clock, my stamp." Sandra was dissolving. "There is a mistake," Nicole said, her voice like steel, "but it is not mine. I am also curious, Miss Mills, about the emergency override fee you charge Ms. Hayes the cash. I'd like to know what statute or county ordinance authorizes that specific fee." Sandra Mills made a small, strangled sound. She gripped the clerk station. She was trapped. She had been caught red-handed by the one person she couldn't bully, lie to, or dismiss. And then Nicole said, raising her voice to address the entire court, "We are going to have a long discussion about docket assignments, specifically the pre-arrangement consultation you had this morning with a Mr. Mark Donovan." In the back of the courtroom, Mark Donovan, who had just sauntered in to handle his case, froze. His smug grin vanished. He saw Sandra's white face and then his eyes locked with Nicole's. He knew instantly that he was caught. Nicole Brooks leaned forward. "Miss Mills, I am ordering an immediate recess. I am also ordering Officer Dawson to secure your desk, your computer, and your personal effects. You are not to touch anything. We will be having a meeting with the presiding judge and the district attorney's office. Officer Dawson, please escort Miss Mills to my chambers. And Officer Dawson, call the DA. Tell him to send his best investigator from the Public Integrity Unit immediately, and ensure Mr. Mark Donovan does not leave the courthouse. I believe he is a material witness to multiple felonies." "All rise," Dawson bellowed, his voice booming as Nicole stood and swept from the bench. Sandra Mills let out a low wail and sank into her chair, her face in her hands. The entire courtroom was in stunned, chaotic silence. The gavel had fallen, not on a defendant, but on the system itself. Nicole's chambers were a hive of sudden, furious activity. Officer Dawson stood by the door with a trembling, weeping Sandra Mills, who had been placed in a simple guest chair. Nicole was on the phone, not with the presiding judge. Not yet. She was on the phone with David Collins, the court administrator. "David, this is Judge Brooks. Yes, the new Part 3B. No, I haven't had a chance to look at the packet, and that's why I'm calling," Nicole said, her voice a whip crack of controlled fury. She watched Sandra over the rim of her desk. "I'm calling to inform you that I have just placed your head clerk, Sandra Mills, on administrative leave, effective immediately." The voice on the other end of the phone was a squawk of protest. "With all due respect, David, I don't give a damn about protocol. I'm telling you what I saw. I've been in this courthouse since I arrived this morning. I've personally witnessed Miss Mills commit, by my count, at least 3 separate felonies: bribery, extortion, and tampering with court records. So you can either come down here and manage the administrative side of this, or you can read about it in the newspaper. After I'm done with the district attorney, your choice." She hung up without waiting for a reply. "Your Honor," Sandra whispered, her voice from crying. "Please, it was a mistake, a misunderstanding. I'll pay the money back." "You'll pay what money back, Miss Mills?" Nicole asked, her voice soft. It was the prosecutor's trap. "The cash you extorted from a domestic violence victim, or the money Mr. Donovan gave you in the envelope?" "How many envelopes have there been, Sandra? How long has this been your little side business?" I don't know what you're talking about," Sandra tried, a last desperate grasp at denial. "You took a thick, white envelope from Mark Donovan in exchange for a folded piece of paper. You then placed that envelope in the top left-hand drawer of your desk," Nicole said, her voice devoid of emotion. "I am willing to bet my entire judicial pension that when the investigators open that drawer, they will find that envelope and it will be full of cash. Am I wrong?" Sandra's face crumpled. She knew she was done. The precision of the observation was undeniable. The door to the chambers opened, and presiding Judge Harold Bennett swept in. He was an older man with a lion's mane of white hair, and he looked apoplectic. "Brooks, what in God's name is the meaning of this?" he boomed. "You can't just detain a court employee. You've thrown the entire morning docket into chaos. There are procedures." "Judge Bennett," Nicole said, standing up. She was shorter than him, but she seemed to take up all the oxygen in the room. "Please sit. Miss Mills is a criminal. I caught her red-handed, selling docket assignments and extorting victims." Bennett stopped, his mouth open. "Sandra, our Sandra. She's been here for years. That's a libelous accusation, Judge." "Is it?" Nicole said. She walked over to Officer Dawson. "Officer, you secured her desk." "Yes, Your Honor. Nothing in or out." "Excellent. Judge Bennett," Nicole said, turning back to him. "Will you accompany me on a brief field trip?" Without waiting for an answer, Nicole swept out of her chambers, past the roiling chaos of the courtroom hallway, and back to the clerk's office. Bennett and Dawson, with Sandra in tow, followed. The lobby was packed and buzzing. Everyone knew something was wrong. Nicole ignored them all, walked behind the counter, and stood at Sandra's desk. "The top left-hand drawer, Miss Mills," Nicole said. "Please open it." Sandra, shaking like a leaf, used her key. She pulled the drawer open. Inside, beneath a stack of sticky notes and paper clips, were 2 envelopes. One was the thick white one from Mark Donovan. The other was a crumpled mess of bills from Rebecca Hayes. Judge Bennett let out a sound like a deflating tire. "Oh, Sandra, no." Nicole, using a pen to avoid touching the envelopes, nudged the white one. This one, I suspect, is from Mr. Donovan. She turned to Bennett. She's been selling docket assignments, Judge, letting lawyers like Donovan know in advance who they're getting so they can prep for a friendly judge or ditch a hard one. She's been poisoning the well. And this, Nicole said, gesturing to the crumpled cash, is from a victim of domestic violence. Miss Mills charged her cash to backdate a restraining order petition, a petition that by law she is required to file for free. She extorted a woman who was terrified for her life. Judge Bennett looked at Sandra with a profound, soul-deep disappointment. Sandra, why? Sandra finally broke. It was a complete shattering confession. Because they don't pay me enough, she shrieked, her voice cracking. All these years in this pigsty, all these years of dealing with this trash, she gestured to the lobby. All these years of fixing the judge's mistakes, of being yelled at, of being treated like a servant. Donovan, he was just grateful. He said I deserved more. And that woman, she was late. There are rules. The rules you broke, Nicole said, her voice like ice. The rules you sold. At that moment, 2 men in dark suits arrived. They flashed badges at Officer Dawson. DA's office, public integrity. We got a call from a Judge Brooks. That's me, Nicole said, stepping forward. Gentlemen, welcome to the Mercer County Courthouse. This is your primary suspect, Miss Sandra Mills. And this, she gestured to the drawer, is your primary evidence. I believe you'll find she's been running a pay-to-play scheme for some time. I suspect, given her arrogance, it's been going on for years. Nicole then pointed to the door. Your co-conspirator, Mr. Mark Donovan, is currently being detained in my courtroom. I'd start with him. The investigator's eyes lit up. This wasn't a case they'd have to build. It was a gift-wrapped conviction. As the investigators began the formal process, reading Sandra her rights, photographing the drawer, Nicole turned to Judge Bennett. This is the rot, Judge, she said, her voice low. This is what happens when we, the judiciary, get too comfortable. We let the Sandras of the world run things. We trade integrity for convenience. This isn't just her failure. It's ours. Bennett, who had been a judge for decades, looked around his lobby as if seeing it for the first time. He saw the desperate faces, the confusion, the fear, and he saw the woman who had been exploiting it all. You're right, Judge, he said, his voice heavy. You are absolutely right. He looked at Nicole, his eyes filled with a new dawning respect. What do you need? I need a new clerk, Nicole said. A temporary one immediately. Someone who understands that their only job is to serve the public, not to rule it. And I need a full top-to-bottom audit of every case Miss Mills and Mr. Donovan have ever touched together. This, she said, looking at the crying, hyperventilating Sandra, is just the tip of the iceberg. The arrest of Sandra Mills sent a seismic shockwave through the courthouse. She was not just an employee. She was an institution. The sight of her being led out of the lobby in handcuffs, sobbing and shouting, was a spectacle that brought the building to a grinding halt. But Nicole Brooks was just getting started. While the DA's investigators processed Sandra, who, faced with the irrefutable evidence, had begun to sing like a canary, Nicole had Mark Donovan brought to her chambers. He entered not with handcuffs, but with 2 very large bailiffs and his own high-priced lawyer, who had apparently been on speed dial. The smugness was gone, replaced by a waxy, terrified pallor. Judge Brooks, his lawyer began, a man named Harris. My client is here voluntarily, but save it, Mr. Harris, Nicole said, sitting behind her new desk. Your client is not here voluntarily. He is here because I ordered him detained as a material witness to bribery of a court officer. However, in the last stretch of time, Miss Mills has cooperated, and it seems material witness is being upgraded to co-conspirator. Donovan went white. It was a gift. She helps me with scheduling. It's a tip, like a barista." Nicole actually laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound. A tip. "Mr. Donovan, you are an officer of the court. You know just as I know that what you did was bribe a public official to gain an unfair advantage in the judicial assignment process. You weren't tipping her. You were paying her to stack the deck, to compromise the very foundation of blind justice in this county." She leaned forward. "So here is what is going to happen. The DA's investigators are right next door. In a moment, they are going to come in here and arrest you. You will be processed and your bail will be set at a level that will make your eyes water. The state bar will be notified this afternoon and your license will be summarily suspended by sundown." "This is an outrage," Harris blustered. "No, this is a reckoning," Nicole corrected him. "However, I am a practical woman. Miss Mills's corruption is my primary concern. You, Mr. Donovan, are just a symptom. So you have one choice. You can cooperate fully. You can detail every single bribe, every case you paid to have steered, every piece of information you bought from her. You will wear a wire, and you will help them uncover just how deep this rot goes. If you do that, maybe the DA will be inclined to listen when you ask for leniency. Or you can play tough with Mr. Harris, and I will personally recommend to the DA that you are charged with the maximum on every single count. Your career is over, Mr. Donovan. The only question is whether you spend the next years in a cell." Donovan looked at his lawyer, his eyes screaming for help. Harris, seeing the brick wall in front of him, just sighed and loosened his tie. "You should listen to the judge, Mark." Donovan collapsed. He confessed to everything. It was worse than Nicole had imagined. For some time, Donovan had been paying Sandra. It started small. Cash to lose a file for a day. It escalated to larger amounts to guarantee his case landed in front of a notoriously lenient part-time judge. But the real bombshell, the one that made Nicole feel sick, was what was in the folded paper she had seen him take that morning. It wasn't a docket assignment. It was a sealed witness list. Donovan's arrangement was for a high-profile felony assault. His client was a wealthy, connected thug. The paper Sandra had given him contained the name and home address of the prosecution's star witness, the victim's sister, who had been in hiding. Sandra Mills hadn't just been selling scheduling favors. She had been selling people for cash. Nicole's blood ran cold. She immediately called the DA's investigator back in. "Forget Donovan. I need a protective detail. Now get a team to this address," she said, reading the address from Donovan's confession. "The witness in State versus Marchetti is compromised." The revelation changed everything. This was no longer bribery. This was conspiracy. This was endangerment. This was a level of corruption that could get people killed. The karma that hit Sandra Mills was no longer about losing her job. It was about losing her life. When confronted with this, with the fact that her tip had put a woman's life in mortal danger, even Sandra's defenses shattered. The investigators found a client list in a locked drawer. Mark Donovan was just one of several lawyers in her pay-to-play scheme. She had a ledger. She had dates. She had amounts. Her years of service was a criminal enterprise built on a foundation of casual cruelty and systemic racism, and funded by extorting the desperate and the corrupt. She wasn't just fired. She was held without bail as a flight risk and a danger to the community. Her entire life's work, her identity as the queen of the courthouse, was incinerated in the space of one morning, all because she laughed at the wrong woman. All because she assumed that a black woman in a pantsuit couldn't possibly be her new boss. The Mercer County Courthouse did not recover quickly. The Sandra Mills scandal, as the papers dubbed it, was catastrophic. Sandra Mills pleaded guilty to a slew of charges. including multiple counts of bribery, counts of tampering with public records, and one count of conspiracy to obstruct justice. The judge, brought in from another county, threw the book at her. The years of service was not a mitigating factor. It was an aggravating one. She was sentenced to years in state prison. She fainted when the sentence was read. Mark Donovan was disbarred. His testimony given in exchange for a lighter sentence took down several other lawyers and permanently tarnished the careers of more. His wealthy client, seeing the case against him implode, also took a plea. The witness, thankfully, had been secured by the DA's team just in time. But Nicole Brooks's work was far from over. The real karma wasn't just Sandra's punishment. It was the rebuilding. Nicole, with the full backing of a humbled Judge Bennett, led the charge. Her first act was to hire a new head clerk. She promoted the young, timid public defender who had been Sandra's first victim of the day. He was stunned, but Nicole saw his core of integrity. "Mr. Reed," she told him in her chambers, "I'm not offering you this job because you're a great lawyer. I'm offering it because you were respectful. Even when you were being disrespected, you followed the rules even when you were being bullied. This office doesn't need a tyrant. It needs a public servant. Can you be that?" He accepted, and his first act was to hang a new sign at the clerk's window in English and Spanish. "We are here to help. Your dignity is our priority." Nicole's second act was to find Rebecca Hayes, the woman who had paid the cash bribe. Nicole personally apologized to her on behalf of the court. She had the money returned to her from a court emergency fund, and she presided over Ms. Hayes's final restraining order hearing herself, granting a permanent order of protection. Justice, delayed and extorted, was finally served, but the biggest change was in the atmosphere. Judge Nicole Brooks had in one morning established a new standard. Her courtroom 3B became a legend. It was efficient. It was intolerant of games. But it was above all fair. She treated the public defenders with the same respect as the corporate lawyers. She listened to defendants. She explained her rulings. The casual, cruel racism that Sandra had wielded like a weapon was gone, choked out by the new light. Later, Nicole was walking through the lobby at the end of a long day. The lobby was clean. The air felt lighter. The new head clerk, Mr. Reed, was at the window patiently explaining a complex filing procedure to a young woman. The young woman was black. She was dressed in a simple suit, and she was clearly nervous, a first-year associate from a small firm. "I know it's confusing," Reed was saying kindly. "The motion for substitution of counsel has to be filed with the original case number, but the proposed order needs to go here. Let me just show you." He came out from behind the glass and stood beside her, pointing to the line on her form. The young lawyer looked up at him, her relief palpable. "Thank you. Thank you so much. I was worried I'd get it wrong." "Everyone gets it wrong the first time," Reed smiled. "My job is to help you get it right. Welcome to Mercer County, Counselor." Nicole watched the exchange. She saw the young lawyer stand up straighter, her confidence restored. She saw the fear in her eyes, replaced by a look of belonging. Nicole continued walking toward the exit. She didn't say a word. She didn't have to. The quiet click-clack of her heels on the polished floor was the only sound. It was the sound of integrity. It was the sound of a promise kept. The fortress had been breached. The rot had been carved out. And the work of justice, real justice, was finally beginning. True karma isn't just about punishment. It's about consequences. Sandra Mills' racist, arrogant laughter was an investment in her own destruction. She spent years building a corrupt kingdom, but she tore it all down in one morning because she couldn't see past the color of a woman's skin. She didn't just lose her job, she lost her freedom. And Judge Nicole Brooks didn't just get an apology, she got a chance to rebuild the entire system. She replaced the rot with respect. She tore down the walls of prejudice and rebuilt a foundation of integrity. This story is a powerful reminder that the person you dismiss today could be the person who holds your entire world in their hands tomorrow. Respect is not optional. It's the law. What did you think of Sandra's downfall? Was it justified? Never underestimate the quiet power of dignity and the devastating cost of arrogance. In the polished halls of justice, one woman in a simple gray pantsuit was laughed at, dismissed, and told she didn't look like a judge simply because of the color of her skin. What the arrogant clerk failed to see was that the woman she mocked with such cruel confidence was the very person who held the power to unravel her entire corrupt kingdom in a single morning. That moment teaches us something deeply human and unforgettable. Every soul who walks through your door, whether they wear a suit, scrubs, or faded jeans, deserves basic respect. You never know whose path you're crossing. The person you belittle today might be the one who exposes your secrets tomorrow, not out of revenge, but because true justice has a way of finding its way into the right hands at the right time. Humility isn't weakness, it's wisdom. Kindness isn't optional. It's the foundation that keeps our world from crumbling. When we treat others with contempt, we're really building our own future cage. But when we choose respect, even in small moments, we plant seeds of real change that can heal entire systems and touch countless lives. If this story of quiet courage and swift karma moved you, drop a comment below and tell me, have you ever witnessed or experienced a moment when someone's arrogance came back to haunt them in the most unexpected way? I read every single one, and if you believe in stories that remind us why integrity still matters, hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear this today, and subscribe to the channel while ringing the bell. New, powerful karma stories drop every week. You won't want to miss them. Let's keep spreading messages that make us better humans. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being